I think for any caregiver, there's burnout. I think in the service profession, it is really easy to get burnt out. I was seeing 8 clients a day, 5 days a week before I burnt out. And I can't even imagine what that's like anymore.
You also identified just the experience of having to kind of be super mom and the correlation to how that actually impacted your spousal relationship.
I remember my brother, who's a psychiatrist, he's like, I don't even know how you get out of bed in the morning.
Welcome back to Innovate and Overcome. Today, we are joined by Isabelle Tierney. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, stress management expert, and an international speaker. She holds 2 master's degrees as well as a certification in energy healing and authentic relating. After running a successful therapy practice for more than 10 years, Isabel's journey took a turn and burnout led her to the loss of her health and her marriage. In response, she developed a transformational methodology for less stress, more aliveness, more inspiration, and more joy. Welcome to the show, Isabel. So excited to have you here.
I'm really happy to be here and I can't wait for our conversation.
Now, your this process running a business first off on a practice in the area that you work in itself is it takes a toll on people. You're meeting with people, you're listening to fundamentally their issues, their troubles, their problems, helping them get to terms with those and try to move past them. And spending 10 years doing that, I can see how that might lead to burnout. In fact, I would imagine it's probably somewhat common to a degree in your industry.
It is very common. And what I was working, so I moved to Boulder in 2003, became licensed as a marriage and family therapist, and then worked with eating disorders was one of my specialties. So marriage
Mhm.
and family therapy and eating disorders. And I don't know how much you know about eating disorders. 1 in 10 people who gets the diagnosis of anorexia dies. It is
Mhm.
actually the highest mental health death of any mental health disease. And so I was literally seeing clients on the verge of death
Wow.
all the time. I would have hospitals calling me from all over the country to say, hey, can you take this client? Can you take this client? So that, and then couples, even though couples, I love couples work, couples rarely come to you when they're doing well and just they just want to get better. They usually come in crisis. And usually one of the member of the couple has been dragged there and really doesn't want to be there. So yeah, it was a lot. And, I think for any caregiver, there's burnout. People who take care of people who are sick, people who are
Mhm.
therapists, teachers. I mean, I think in the service profession, if we're really committed and really want to create impact, it is really easy to get burnt out. And if we're people pleasers too, which many of us in the service profession are.
I can see that. And it's so interesting what you share about the eating disorders. I was unaware of that. And so I think that's very helpful information for our viewers to know and quite fascinating. And so I can, again, just thinking through that, trying to put myself in your shoes to some degree and being around that experience on a regular, repetitious basis, getting the phone calls from the hospital. Can you help this person? This person is in dire need, dire straits, and being called to do that type of work. When you see people going through major challenges, and I have a neighbor who's a amazing guy. He also works in a hospital industry, and he tells me the stories about individuals that come in and the things he has to see on a daily basis, and it's really really impactful. I know for the many servicemen and women who also work in as first responders. I mean, they're impacted by a lot of these things, and so how is it that you were able to last even 10 years before you reached burnout in this business?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. So, in my history, because I grew up with a lot of trauma as a child, that's the way I learned to cope with my trauma. I
Mm.
developed, like many good girls, an eating disorder. I had everything on the outside. I got the 2 master's degrees. I went to a really incredible boarding school. I had all the things, but I struggled with food and body image, and I struggled with bulimia. And so my own healing journey really informed my desires. Many of us, right? Our wounds are often what we end up helping people with. That's why I wanted to work with women. It was mostly women. It was like 90% women who had eating disorders as well, because I had found a way.
Mm.
I had found a way. And that's why hospitals were calling me because I was not working unless they were seriously sick and medically dangerous. I was working from a place of acceptance, like, oh, you're using this coping skill, which is really not working for you. Can we see these other coping skills to make you feel better? But I'm not going to get rid of the one you've got until we find better ones. So I was never pushy. I was never shaming. I was never in fear. And so they were not used to it. They come into my office thinking I was going to get rid of their favorite coping tool. And I'd be like, no, unless you're medically dangerous, let's wait. Let's see if we can find other ways to cope in life. And that's why my work worked so much. So I was very passionate about healing that population because few people are really trained to work with that population.
That makes a lot of sense. And so, when did you start to recognize and see, I guess, the culmination of the work, of the activity you were doing was beginning to take a toll on you personally?
I think it's chicken and the egg. So there were two things that happened to me, which I think I say in the CV, the bio you read. So Brian and I went through a divorce. And so, a divorce is never a one reason thing, right? There were a bunch of things in our family, in our couple that were not working. But I know without a doubt that my having so little bandwidth at the end of the day and on the weekends for him, because I was always taking care of people who had more need than him, right? And it was either my clients or my children. I had three children, and because of the abuse I grew up with, I like swore that I was going to be the best mom. And I really was. Like, my kids just came to visit last week, and like I did a really good job. So guess who was the one who got nothing of me? None of me. It was my husband.
Mm,
And so that was one of the piece. There was also, other puzzle pieces. I want to keep those private. So that was one. And then I kept noticing I was exhausted. Like I would last like 2 hours and then I'd be so exhausted. And I remember going the medical route and no, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And finally I went to an alternative practitioner who made me do a cortisol test with saliva. And I remember getting the results, and I basically was out of cortisol. So, cortisol comes in order to, when we need stress, right? When
mhm,
we need to engage in a stressful thing. Well, if you overuse it and you're chronically stressed, your body stops even having any. And I had like
mm.
nothing left, which is why I was so tired. And I remember my brother, who's a psychiatrist, so he knows numbers. He's like, I don't even know how you get out of bed in the morning. And it was so helpful because I didn't understand.
Interesting that, again, your brother's psychiatrist, the testing you did to help really get clear and discover what some of the underlying, I guess, medical aspects that were happening. And so, but you also identified just the experience of having to kind of be super mom and the reasons for that that were really important to you, and the correlation to how that actually impacted your spousal relationship, which, I mean, I can totally understand. It just makes sense that that would happen. And I suspect there's similarities for a lot of people who go through similar challenges.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many things, all of us, we need to take care of. And how the heck do we prioritize those things? And so it seems like dying clients, children, although I probably would put children first. I don't know. I would like it was that taking care of a household, having a social life, exercising because I was always because of my former eating disorder. I always was it. Like the husband, oh, cats, dogs. It's like, and the husband is like, well, he's a grown up. He's not. He doesn't have an eating disorder. He's not a child. He's fine. So we make assumptions and we make assumptions that I made assumption that he needed less of me
Mhm.
than the relationship needed. This. We need to cultivate relationships, especially when we have all those stresses. The relationship should be the home, should be the place we get revitalized in or renourished from. And that was not what Brian and I did with each other.
Wow. And so, how did you start to really come to realization of that? And I guess, what were some of the first steps that you began to take to see about creating self repair, I guess, in what you were starting to come to terms with and identify?
The first piece was nutrition. And so I started taking a lot of supplements to repair my nervous system because my nervous system was completely shot. And then, Brian and I, we divorced, but by the time we did it, and I think that was part of already my starting to heal, we did it really consciously. So
Mm,
thankfully, we did not do it from the place in which we initially decided to do the divorce, which was very stressful, lots of conflict. But we really refused to do that for our children. We refused to do that for ourselves. So even in the act of divorcing, even though that sounds like it's an extreme stressful thing, I mean, we had dinner the night before we got our divorce papers. And when we went to court, we had a cup of coffee afterwards. It's just, we had tried so hard to, to fight less and to solve our conflict. But I think both of us came from such stressful places. He, because of his own issues, me, because of my own issues. We just were not regulated, that word
Mhm.
regulated enough to be able to not take it out on each other, the stress that we were experiencing. So I had a year where we really only stayed apart a year and then we started repairing again. But it was actually a really good year. I started really taking care of myself. I didn't have the conflict that was going on all the time. So that really settled me a
Mm.
lot. I actually did a one woman show in New York during that year. And I stopped working so hard. I mean, I had to really make some very clear decisions about what I gave my priorities to. And so I was seeing 8 clients a day, 5 days a week before I burnt out. And I can't even imagine what that's like anymore. Like these days, like 3 to 4 clients, also do also a lot of other work, but like actually really 3 clients one on one, which is different than the rest of the work I do. It's maximum. Like it's maximum because I didn't realize how present I have to be to people.
Mm.
And even though it's invigorating, it's also, if you do it 8 times a day, hearing trauma, very, very depleting too. So, time, seeing less clients, nutrition, space. I had never been alone, right? Because I'd gone to college, met Brian at 22. So, that
Mm.
year I was alone, also living at home alone. My kids were out. Well, one child was home. And so, all that started settling me. And meditation, and all the things that we do to take care of ourselves. And not working out to lose weight and like working out to actually settle my nervous system, not to do more, which was also a big piece.
Wow, incredible. The full gamut. And we're going to hear more about this incredible journey as we come back after these important messages.